Thank you for listening to the Distinguished Physical Education Podcast. Just a quick announcement before we get into today's episode. I'm excited to share that Distinguished PE has officially launched 3 new self-paced courses. You can take them for graduate-level credits, for hours toward renewing your teaching license, or simply for your own professional growth and reflection. Each course aligns with a chapter from the book, Becoming a Distinguished Physical Education Teacher, and provides opportunities for authentic, job-embedded learning. The first course dives into promoting equity and inclusion in physical education, examining the impact of eliminating exclusionary practices, implementing small-sided games, elevating student voice, and transitioning from outdated to contemporary practices. In the second course, High Expectations for Student Behavior, teachers will reflect on class rules, practice communicating behavior expectations during transitions, and will understand the purpose and structure of a class reset. The third course, my personal favorite, explores standards-based content and language objectives. In it, teachers will reflect on why standards-based CLOs are important, the impact that they have on student learning and engagement, how to create them and communicate them in student-friendly ways, and how to check for students' understanding of them. You can earn 3 graduate-level credits for each course through Colorado State University Pueblo, 9 total if you complete all 3, which can help teachers move over on their pay scale in many districts. If you're looking for renewal hours, each course offers up to 100 hours toward your teaching license. To learn more or get registered, head over to www.distinguishedpe.com and click on Virtual Courses. The direct link to sign up is also in the description to this episode. My guest today is Paddy Bailey. Paddy received his bachelor's degree in K-12 physical education and a master's in physical education leadership through SUNY Cortland. He has been teaching elementary PE for 10 years and is entering his 3rd year at Rensselaer Elementary in the Rensselaer City School District. Paddy is currently the secretary for the Capital Zone of New York State AHPERD and has been actively involved with state and local conferences. Paddy shares some of his favorite games and activities, both on the podcast and on social media, while grounding them in standards-based learning outcomes for his students. He shares what student-led instruction looks like in his PE program and the impact that it has on student learning, along with why it's important to take creative risks and expose students to a variety of different movement experiences. And now I bring you Paddy Bailey. Paddy, it's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here, honestly.
In this conversation, we are digging into what it looks like to take creative risks in PE while still staying grounded in standards-based learning. You've been really intentional about experimenting with new activities. So to kick us off, let's talk a little bit about innovation. Can you share an example of an activity or skill you've introduced recently that felt new or different, and how you made sure that it's still aligned with standards-based learning, which is something that I like to ground most of my conversations on this podcast in?
Yeah, absolutely. I do about 14 units per year. And over the last 2 years, I've added at least 4 or 5 that I can think of. I work at a Title I school, and a health partner by a CDPHP gave us a grant for Strider bikes. So we just did a program where all kindergartners learn how to bike, and working my way through the curriculum that they provide, trying to align it to the standards, but also what's going to work for me. Obviously, something that's a life skill that we talk about, and especially in a community where everyone might not have the opportunity to get a bike at that age, is something really great. So how it works is they're balance bikes. The foundation is balance, and then working on adding the pedals. So we ended up doing 3 lessons without pedals and then 3 lessons with pedals. And just seeing the progress of students is amazing. I'd say we probably had about an 80% hit rate, which is great. And the other unit that I think aligns with standard 1, both SHAPE and New York State. And what I think is really good for social emotional learning, we talk about PE being an opportunity where you learn these things like trust, you learn these things, confidence, all these things that aren't intentionally taught in other subjects. I adapted Mike Graham. He's PE for every kid, I think, on Twitter. I had taken his jump rope ninja unit and kind of, adjusted it to our own thing. And I obviously believe that jump rope is a foundation for athletic ability, jumping, coordination, all these things that later in life provide physical literacy for kids. But also what I love about this unit is the way we set it up. My gym's basically a big basketball court, pretty much a high school sized basketball court. It's one of the only units where it's student choice stations. So what we do is we have a station in the middle. We call it our belt station, our testing station. So students can test to see how many jumps they can do. For third grade, a black belt is 70 jumps, or for fifth grade, it might be 100. So that's kind of like their testing station. But then around the gym, we also have different jumping challenges. So Nick Woodard, who does Learning the Ropes, they did a school-wide competition this year. So we did like a 30-second challenge. We did a long jump where we put out our crash mat and did a long jump. We did a hurdle course. The last station is what we call the practice station. So basically, we have kids who are black belts that are the highest jumpers, and they will intentionally go to the practice station and help teach other kids who aren't black belts. I can't be everywhere at once. This obviously provides students with the opportunity to, help each other. And I think that if you don't do that, it's a great unit. And I'm willing, obviously, to talk with anybody about what works for them and what doesn't work for others. And I think that is something that I picked up over the last few years, that my kids beg for that unit. They ask me in May when jump rope is. They ask me in September when jump rope is. We do it for the entire month of February. That's how much our kids love it.
You mentioned standards-based social skills and how you weave those into units like you just described. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What are some other examples of how students demonstrate standards-based social skills during some of the units and lessons that you just described?
I think there's some people that are very intentional in what they do. They say, okay, we're going to do an activity about trust, or we're going to do an activity about cooperation. I wouldn't say I'm intentional to that point, but what I am intentional about is giving students the opportunity to do those things. For instance, if we're doing gymnastics, which is something that we do stations based, what I'll do is, the first day or two, I'll just make groups however I make groups that day, see how it goes. But in the second week of the unit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of those students that might be higher skilled students, quote unquote leaders, and spread them out throughout the groups so that they're going to, be intentional about saying, oh, hey, try it this way, or hey, do it this way. The word that I use a lot to incorporate these social skills is I kind of encompass it all under strategy. For soccer, we do six-way soccer with, grades 4 through 6. I'm going to give students a minute in between every single game to talk with their teammates, whether it's strategy, whether it's about trust. And then I try to be intentional about my wrap up for the day. Hey, what's something that worked for you? Hey, what's something that didn't work for you? The ability for them to come back and say, oh, well, it worked when I passed to my teammates more, shows me that they're learning about cooperation and trust. So I think that just be intentional about opportunity. You need to give students opportunities inside that lesson to talk about it or to show that they understand. I have this game that I do for football. I call it Face Off. I bought a bunch of jumbo cards and laminated them, and I throw them face down on a table. And how it works is students might be in teams of 3 or 4, however the numbers work out for that day. They have a hula hoop that they have to throw from, and then there's 2 poly dots. One is going to be about 3 or 5 yards away. The other one's going to be like 10 to 12 yards away on the other side of the gym, basically horizontal on the basketball court. I make them be very intentional about knowing who the thrower is and knowing who the catcher is. You might play football outside of school and you can throw the ball 40 yards, but if you have a person on your team that can't catch the ball at 10 yards, you're going to lose the game because you chose to not strategize that way. Giving kids intentional points of thinking about these things, saying, I can be selfish and go as far as I want, but if Jenny can't throw 10 yards, I'm costing my team at that point. And that starts to build that self-reflection, that accountability of, hey, these are things that I want them to learn inside the game. And we talk about obviously learning in PE and showing those things. I need it to be student-led. I can tell them to be responsible all I want. They have to prove to me that they understand what I'm talking about.
One of the things that I talk about with the teachers that I support are the various ways you can communicate your standards-based objectives in any given lesson. What I really enjoy about what you said was you align everything in the lesson so that there's no doubt that when students leave class, they understand what standard they were making progress towards that day, because You ask them questions that are aligned back to the concept of the standard that you're trying to teach them. And then you give them those opportunities to communicate with each other. You also mentioned a closure at the end of your lesson where you kind of sum all those things up. I just think that it's important to share with the people who listen that there's lots of different ways and different styles to communicate an objective.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I do that if you don't do that I would recommend when it comes to a closure is before I even talk is I'll do a check-in. Let's say we're doing soccer we talked about. How do you feel that you did in soccer today? And it's just thumbs up, thumbs middle, or thumbs down. And sometimes I notice that I think a majority of thumbs down come from people that struggled with the social emotional aspect. Doesn't matter how they did at soccer, they might have struggled at either, oh, my team lost, or I didn't work well with so and so. So I think those are ways, again, to kind of see where students are individually on things inside of a team setting. And then I might follow up with, oh, how do you feel your team worked today? Thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. And usually the double thumbs down are the people that were just like really upset with how their team dynamic worked that day. And we talk a lot about you don't have to get along with everyone, but you have to work with everyone because that's, how life works. So those are definitely things that I try to intentionally do.
I've seen some really powerful lessons on self reflection, where at the end of the lesson, the teacher will do something similar to what you just said, whether it's a thumbs up to the side or thumbs down. And then the teacher will ask a student a question about either reflecting on their strength, like if they had their thumb up, what are some examples of how you cooperated today in order to assess yourself with a thumbs up? Or if you had your thumb down, what's something that you could do next time in order to give yourself a thumbs up? So you're giving students that opportunity, whether it's a personal self-reflection or it's going to be a turn and talk with a partner, to go a little bit deeper into that and say, oh, you know what? I had my thumb to the side today because I wasn't passing the ball as much as I should have. I can cooperate a little bit better next time, and here's how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and I think that obviously, reflects back on the big, not the big thing, but one of the big things that nationwide we're talking about right now is SEL and physical education. And SEL is something that is built into PE as long as you're using these best practices. So definitely agree with what you're saying on all those things.
One of the things that you mentioned today was student-led instruction and how you implement that, and maybe even how it's been a goal in your teaching, something you want to focus on in the future. What does student-led actually look like in your PE classes, and how do you help students build the confidence and the skills to take on that kind of leadership?
We talk about leadership a lot. I think some things we talked about are putting leaders in groups is a big, big thing for me. Right away, first week, 2 weeks of school, I can tell you who the leaders in each class are going to be. And it has nothing to do with whatever physical activity we're doing. I think it has to do with their ability to do the right thing all the time. And putting them in groups helps that start. I think where students get the confidence to help out is knowing that we're all starting on the same thing. We do so many different units that there's going to be one that you love that you're going to help somebody with. You might be a bad soccer player and feel like you can't help during soccer, but you might be a really good gymnast and you're going to help us out during gymnastics. Or you might be great at basketball and you can show everybody how to dribble around the gym, but you might be terrible when we do bowling. I have a catchphrase that every unit won't be your favorite unit, but it's somebody's favorite. That has like stuck with me forever. At the end of this year, actually, I wasn't going to teach baseball, softball, hitting, striking. And I was like, that's probably somebody's favorite unit. And I owe it to them to do it. I'm just thinking this one kid in my head. I won't say his name, but I know how hard he worked in every unit this year, knowing that baseball, softball was coming up and that was his favorite. And he was a leader and he did those things and he tried. Like, you're not going to be great at everything, but you're going to be great at something. And the second thing is with K3, 4, 5, maybe a day or two, but with K3 especially, we do a lot of station and partner work for pretty much every unit that we do, learning the skill first or learning the basis of skills that we do first. Let's say we're doing hockey. My students know how to do the grip, they know how to pass. So they might say to their partner, hey, try it this way. And they're not afraid to do that because we've built the community of saying, this is what we're going to do in here. And what we talk about a lot is how do we correct someone in the way that we want them to be corrected? I could run up to you, Gary, and say, Gary, you are doing such a bad job right now. You better figure it out. And that doesn't solve anything. But if I say, hey, when you're passing, make sure that you are stepping with your opposite foot so that it's a more accurate pass. So I always found that being intentional about the opportunity for students to provide corrective feedback, and I make sure to make a point of talking about the incorrect way of talking to someone, whether it's feedback or whatever.
You're making me think about a lot of the lessons that I've observed that focused on peer feedback. And teachers will say very similar things to what you just described, which is that, today we're going to be working on a hockey skill. I'm going to teach you the cues to that skill. But our main goal today is not just to get better at that skill, it's to give respectful feedback to our peers. And when we give that type of feedback, this is what it sounds like. We might tell them something that they're doing well. We might tell them something that we want them to practice and to work on because everybody in here has things that they want to grow in. So you talked about student-led activities or student-led instruction. Let's move over to student voice, which is a phrase that I think means different things to different teachers. So can you give us like a sample structure or routine that helps you build towards student-led moments in your lessons? Maybe you can share something that a listener could try out in their gym right after they hear this episode.
When it comes to student voices in the gym, I think what that starts with is giving them power right away, maybe not day one or day two of the year, but giving them power right away in a lesson of, hey, this is what we're going to do today. Kind of some things that you touched on with partner work. Hey, we're going to try giving corrective feedback. Or it might be, for instance, we play this game called Avengers Endgame. I saw it on YouTube one time and I've kind of really kind of melded it in my own. And what I find so great about this game is there's no correct strategy. So what I'm giving students the opportunity to do is talk to their peers about what might be successful for them. So basically how the game works is there's 6 infinity stones. There's 6 colored teams, it's all the rainbow, and they all have their own colored ball. Students, one at a time from their hoop, let's say you're on the green team, you're gonna run to another hoop and try to play rock, paper, scissors and beat that person. Let's say you win at blue, you bring blue back. You can't get blue again because you already have blue, and you can't get your own color. And you can't take, let's say blue has orange, you can't take orange from blue. You have to take that team's color. So now, you're working on communication between peers right away. Because as soon as the game starts, if you're not paying attention, hey, Kathy, go to orange, and she goes to orange, and you already had orange, you just wasted a turn in your game. And what I think it does right away, I always try to play this game in the second or third week of the year. It's one of my students' favorite games, but also it really hammers home that you and your teammates have to strategize. You have to talk to each other. You have to be purposely communicating in order to get to where you want to go if you want to win. And I talk about leaders. This is where you kind of see those leaders form of like, you're going to see some kids talking more and say, this is what I think works. But you're also going to see those same kids that might be leaders say, what do you think, Johnny? What do you think, Timmy? Round ends, boom. 1 minute, talk to your team, what you're going to do, what you want to change, what you're going to do the same. And just giving students the ability to feel like they have the power for how they're going to play the game inside of their group. Giving students the first opportunity to say, hey, this is what I think, and we should try it. And whether we try it or not, that's up to the group dynamic. But giving them the ability to say, this is my voice, this is how we can try things, and this is how we can do things, I think is one of the most unique things in PE that we don't necessarily get in other subjects.
All right, I want to expand on that a little bit because you're demonstrating how creative you are by finding these really fun activities and modifying them to meet the needs of your students. And we also talked about standards a little bit earlier. I think you partially answered this question, but my wondering is how do you explicitly bring in standards-based learning with an activity like Avengers Endgame that you saw on YouTube or Instagram? What I think happens is that teachers find an exciting game on social media and then they just present it to their students the next day. And when students walk away from that class, I think that most of them would say something like, to respond to the question, what did you learn in PE today? I think most students in those cases would say, oh, we learned how to play Avenger Endgame today, and you have to get all 6 colors of the rainbow in order to win. What do you do in order to avoid students giving that answer and instead giving an answer that has something to do with a standard that you're teaching your students?
So I think it's definitely a fine line because there are amazing resources online. It's just like when we were younger and they'd say, oh, cite your sources. You can't just copy and paste something and expect it to work for you all the time. So I think what it comes down to get students to say this is what it was is I think the answer of hey, we learned how to play Avengers Endgame is okay as long as it's followed by oh, we had to work as a team. We had to develop a strategy to win. Hey, we played Avengers Endgame today, and we won because me and Gary decided that we were going to go to the things that were closest to us, and that strategy worked for our team. So I think the first thing you say about, oh, well, we learned how to play Avengers Endgame is fine if the follow up sentence is because we learned how to do these things.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that sometimes people get scared away because we talk about bad practices and people who just teach games to teach games. You can teach games if what you are teaching has something to be more broad. Rainbow kickball is a unit for us. Basically, I learned at a conference 6 buckets. I've got these Home Depot buckets, taped them a different color. 6 kids kick at a time. They all kick the buckets. And they can tell me what their strategy on offense is. Hey, I kicked the ball away from my bucket so that it was harder for the defensive team to put my ball back. On defense, they'll say, hey, I was responsible for the green ball no matter where it went, and then I passed it to whoever. So, wow, oh, we're just playing a different kickball game, but they're learning that what I want them to learn has nothing to do with kickball. It has everything to do with what these strategies are because they're going to go back and take that to a sport that they play when they're older. So, developing these strategies inside of gameplay is something that is super important. And like you said, not just say, hey, I learned Avengers Endgame from Coach Bailey's post on Instagram. I'm going to try it today, but saying this is why I want you to learn it.
And I think students are only going to add that extra piece, Avengers Endgame and blank, if teachers do what you're describing, which is ask targeted questions that have to do with either a physical skill or a fitness component or a standards based social skill. There has to be something that ties all those pieces together so that students are constantly reminded, along with Avenger Endgame, I'm also learning about strategies or about my heart rate, whatever other standard it is that you want to focus on. What I find happens sometimes is that teachers will focus on too many standards. And as a result, students walk away saying, we learned Avenger Endgame today. But in reality, the teacher asked 4 or 5 different questions. They were all great questions, but they all came from a different standard. And as a result, students couldn't really pinpoint or focus on their learning. So I really appreciate what you're saying about just having a strong focus on what you want students to walk away with, aligning your questioning, aligning your feedback, your turn and talks, your closures, all that stuff to that learning, that standards based learning, so that students walk away and also give that additional part of the answer. We've talked about like a variety of activities and learning objectives. I'm curious about how you design your units or map out your year. Do you follow a specific structure or process to ensure that you're covering what students need? What does your scope and sequence for an average year look like?
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting because obviously for me, the end goal is 2 things. Obviously, I want, or 3 things really. I want students who develop physical literacy and develop movement skills at a young age. Obviously, that has a lot to do with learning how your body works in movement, learning different movements, and then translating that to the middle school level. 2, I think what it also has to do is a variety of skill movements. And then for me, the third thing is the social emotional piece. I need students to go to middle school knowing how to cooperate, knowing how to solve problems. About 2 to 3 weeks is what I do for most units. So, like I said, I think I did 14 units last year, ranging from obviously the beginning of the year we do a lot of cooperative games, learning to know each other, like I talked about Avengers, learning to talk about learning the gym rules and everything like that. I think is very important to start the year. Usually I do my first half units are football, but for K2 that's throwing and catching. I will teach them how to throw a football, but that's not the basis of the unit. Maybe we get to small sided gameplay with a very good group. A lot of these are just activities or instruction inside of them that I think are important. Soccer, striker ball, bowling, gymnastics, jump rope, floor hockey, rainbow kickball. We did tennis. We did baseball, softball. There's like 2 others or 3. I mean, I'm only at 9, but, I think for me, what it is just being intentional about, we talked about the phrase, not every unit is your favorite unit, but it's somebody's. I want to add dance. You had Victor Spadaro on a couple months ago. Him and I went to Cortland together. Right after the episode, I literally texted him and I said, dude, you got to tell me, about the balls that you use for cardio drumming. And we found a bunch of lummy sticks in our PE closet. And I'm like, that's something I've been wanting to add forever. So there comes a time every year I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to cut, this or this, which is fine. And it could be something where I was at a different school district and we talked about alternating years. One year I might do floor hockey as a striking, with an implement unit. And then the next year I might do baseball or softball, alternating those two because they work on, similar skills. Or this year, we're going to do striker ball as, striking with our hand. But next year, we're going to do volleyball or something like that, And again, not teaching these sports per se, but teaching the skills that involve and get kids physically literate for those things. Because obviously, 50% of our kids aren't going to be high school athletes, probably less than that, So just giving them the basis that we talk about to be a healthy, physically literate individual. And I think what that comes down to is also your ability to base it on your students' needs and your students' desires. I worked at a school that our lacrosse program was like a state champion level program every year. So what was a big unit in our elementary teaching was lacrosse. It's just how it worked itself out. Whereas I'm at a school now where we have no basis for what our successful programs are at the school. So getting just these kids to just be a person that moves their body for the rest of their life, because that's what our goal is. We want kids to love movement. Do 5th graders come in and say, oh, we got to learn tennis today? Yeah, some of them do. But some of them say, oh, wow, this is really cool. We've never done this before. I think it comes down to 3 things. What are your strengths? What are some things that your students would really benefit from trying? And what are some things that haven't worked for you that you need to maybe rotate or find ways to get in?
Just to calibrate a little bit, you've talked about the length of your units, whether they're 2 weeks or 3 weeks. How often do you see each group of students?
So we're on a 6-day schedule, and I see them every other day for 45 minutes. So some weeks they have an hour and a half of PE, some weeks they have 2:15. And what it might come down to is, for me, on what I do 2 or 3 weeks is based on what I want kids to get out of it. I might do jump rope for 3 weeks, because the kids love it, but also because that is a unit that relies heavy on student-led learning and student choice. Whereas some of my other units, like gymnastics, we usually do right before jump rope. That is very much like, hey, here's the stations. You're going to rotate when the music stops, and this is what you're going to do. So it's more structure-based. Whereas some of my longer units are units where I want students to maybe have a little bit more freedom. Striker ball I usually do for 3 weeks because I want to see students learn how to officiate their own game. So I might go longer with those units, whereas a lot of them have played soccer in their life. I might only do soccer for 2 weeks because they're only going to do a set amount of skills in those 2 weeks. I don't need to do a week of dribbling. I need to do a day of dribbling and a day of shooting and passing, and then do X amount with students afterwards.
I mean, I just wanted to clarify because I think a lot of people are going to wonder, well, he talks about a 3-week unit, like how many lessons actually is that? So your 2-week unit is going to be something like 5 lessons then,
5
right?
lessons.
And then the 3-week is 7 or 8,
like
right?
7, yeah, basically. And it might be something where a 3-week unit might be 5 lessons with 2 or 3 quote unquote gameplay or station days that align with the things that we've done. So for instance, I'll take basketball. I think I usually do that for 3 weeks. The first week, I'm going to do skills. Let's take it for 4th grade. Probably do dribbling for a whole day. The first week, I'll do dribbling review with passing the second day. I'll do passing review with shooting. So that pretty much covers the first week, 3 lessons. And then obviously, the next day for the other kids. Lessons 4 and 5 may be smaller games like we play basketball, where it's like a board game and, they're learning how to use dribbling. They're learning how to shoot. They're learning how to pass. We might do that for a lesson. We might do another game. That's probably lessons 4 and 5, maybe 6. So then 7 and 8 might be, hey, on this side, you can play bubble knockout. And on this side, you can play this small sided game. And over here, you can just shoot around if you want to. So sometimes the ends of those units are going to be what we talk about less me and more them. One person might really enjoy playing basketball, sorry, but the next person might just want to learn how to shoot better because they're struggling to do it in a game. And they just might want time. That student might need or want time to just go shoot some hoops themselves. Now, I'm not talking, hey, it's 40 minutes. Go over there and stand by the hoop for 40 minutes. No, but having those things inside of a 3-week lesson or having a longer unit sometimes can provide students with that individualized learning that you might not have been able to give them if it was only 2 weeks.
It's a great example of differentiating for the needs of your students. The only thing that I wanted to tack on to that was that I've seen a lot of teachers have similar structures to their units. And then what they do for those modified game lessons or those student choice activity lessons in order to keep everything tied together, because you still want to have that standards based learning, that theme throughout the lesson, even if students are choosing where they want to go. And one group of students might be playing a game of basketball, sorry, and another group might just be working on their skills over at a hoop in a non competitive setting. You still want them to be learning something related to that unit. That's where I'll see our standards based social skills really come out. I see them most often at the end of the unit during those modified games. So we're going to be learning what it looks like to be a productive member of a group today. And you can do that at this basketball game or this modified game over here, or you could do that, shooting with your friends at this hoop. My favorite example, I use it all the time, is how to win and lose in socially appropriate ways. That's something that it doesn't matter what activity you're playing. So for lesson 4, where you're engaged in modified games, that's a perfect standards-based objective to have. So I just wanted to share that with people because I think it's just a strong connection to what you were describing about the way that your units are laid out.
Absolutely, I agree.
You've done a great job throughout this conversation of giving concrete examples so that teachers can visualize what these things might look like in their space. Can you walk us through maybe one more lesson, something that blends all of these components together, whether it's a new activity that you want to introduce to students, maybe something that's student led, definitely something that has standards in it, and then maybe share how it was received by students if it's something that you've already taught? I don't know, it might be something that you're thinking about teaching next year, but I'd love if you could just kind of package it all together and share an example for everybody.
I don't know why I do. It's something I've always loved. But when I talk about standards based learning or what a lesson looks like when it comes to student learning, I tend to go back to gymnastics. And it's just something that I've always loved teaching. We've had minimal equipment, but we're kind of adding to it as we go. So for those of you that have minimal equipment, stay the course. We just got our first 6 panel mats. So, it will get there. So for instance, for me, tying everything together, we're going to come in, let's say we're doing a 3rd grade lesson for gymnastics. We're going to come in. Our warm up most days is going to be, and it depends. We do a lot of cardiovascular endurance. It could be, hey, we're going to do this motor skill. Hey, we're going to walk, jog, run. And I think this is a perfect time to start talking about social skills. I let students for their warm up, as long as they're moving, they can walk and talk with their friends, or they can jog and talk with their friends, because I think that connecting, we talk about standards based learning, connecting physical movement to happiness or to enjoyment with your friends, I think is important at an early age. Now, if they're sitting there doing nothing, am I going to let them? No, but as long as they're moving, my students know that. We might play a warm up game inside of our stations already being set up. Our stations are going to kind of be near each wall. Let's say we're doing gymnastics. We might play bridge tag. If you tagged, you got to make either a forward bridge or a backwards bridge, connecting a movement that has to do with flexibility and muscular endurance. Got to crawl under the bridge to, save somebody. Could be walking, could be jogging, depending on your space. I have a big enough space that with 3rd grade, I'll kind of let students say, hey, you can run, but if I see you hiding behind the stations, then we're not going to do this anymore. And students know that. So I think that's tying it into the theme. Let's say it's our first day. I might spend a little more time at each station, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll say it's our 2nd or 3rd day. We're going to sit in middle circle. Chloe, tell me what we're going to do at that station. What's one skill that I can practice at that station? So usually my 3rd grade stations are, I have rolling. So we have wedge mats rolling onto a cheerleading mat. At this point, let's say it's the 2nd lesson, we've taught forward rolls, we've taught log rolls and egg rolls. I'll teach them backwards rolls and safety rolls as we go. 2, we'll do handstands. And this is where we talk a lot about student-led choice. They have to prove that they can do the quote unquote easy way. So what we do the easy way is back starts on the wall, hands go to the ground, feet climb up the wall. so that their face is facing the wall and they're climbing up the wall. Easy way, hard way, facing the wall, feet kick up and over. And I make them not prove to me, but obviously, like as I'm watching, like, hey, and if I see a kid doing it the hard way and kind of like rolling over, I'm like, hey, but like we need to go back to doing the easy way. And they know that. Third, we'll talk about the skill of vaulting. I don't have a vault yet. It's on my Amazon wish list for anyone listening out there. But we do a lot of cartwheels. Our main focus is transferring weight from our hands to our feet. We'll do it over a wedge mat. And usually I do it in like 2 or 3 lanes so students can kind of choose their challenge. And this is where I see a lot of students say, hey, try it this way, or, I'm really good at this. Why don't you try doing that? And I think that's a station where I see a lot. And lastly, we do a balance station. I had jump ropes for balance beams. We got a balance beam this year. So we're going to have a real balance beam next year, which is amazing. What I do for that is actually I just put out a bunch of like animal toys. I don't know if you guys have beanbag frogs or rubber chickens or whatever. I just put out a bunch of animal toys and they can walk on the balance beam balancing the animals. They can stand still balancing the animals. They can partner balance. I have people that like do like the 1 foot partner balance where they're trying to balance, an octopus in between their legs and stuff like that. So just adding that silly element to it. I try to do no less than 4 minutes per station. I find that to be like 4 is the minimum number. I want it more towards 5 and 6. And obviously, my students know, and this is something for your gym, that their ability to get through directions directly reflects how much time they get at each station. So they know if they're talking during directions, we're only getting 3, 4 minutes at each station, and it's not going to be as much as you'd like. And that's something we'll talk about at the end. Hey, today we did not get as much time as we wanted to at each station. Putting it all together, standards based. Obviously, there's physical skills in each that we talk about, physical literacy. There's also, their ability to socialize with each other inside their groups. Hey, that was really cool when you tried that balance. Or, hey, that was your first cartwheel, awesome job. So I think developing social skills that, the national standards talk about and the state standards talk about is something that is great inside of gymnastics because it's something that's so individualized, but putting them in groups makes it kind of mold those standards together. And then lastly, getting together at the end, like we talked about before. Hold up a 1 if rolling was your favorite. A 2 if, cartwheels were your favorite. And then give me a thumbs up if you helped somebody today. Give me a thumbs up if you feel like you got better at this skill today, showing me learning, showing me progress, or something as simple as, hey, when you were at this station, how do you feel your group worked together? All these questions that we've kind of talked about already, but I feel like, anytime that you can get students working on a skill in a small group, again, with hopefully putting leaders in each group to facilitate or help facilitate those things, I think is something that, that would be my whole gymnastics lesson for like a day 2 or 3. But that reflects to any station-based unit that I do. And I do a lot of stations K3. I mean, we did stations this year for soccer, basketball, gymnastics, tennis, at least 2 or 3 more that I can think of. And I find that stations do a good job of breaking things up for kids, your ability to observe certain things, and again, also their ability to work together in a small group and develop those social emotional skills through standards that we talk about.
I think the variety that students get from stations helps keep them engaged also. There's always another activity that they can be looking forward to. And as you know, as an elementary PE school teacher, getting students excited about what they're going to engage in for the day is half the battle. If you have kids that show up at the door and they're excited and they're ready to go, you're not going to really have to deal with too many off-task or disruptive behaviors. So I think stations really lend themselves well to that. I think the challenge with stations is, again, we've kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, is finding that one standards-based focus that's going to tie everything together so that students don't just walk away and say, oh, yeah, we did gymnastics stations today. For a lesson like that, what would be the main thing that you want students to walk away from that particular lesson saying that they learned?
So I think that that's something that can vary from day to day. Like, I think the same lesson can provide multiple, but again, we don't want to confuse students with saying, hey, you learned this, this, and this. I think for me, the main thing that comes out of a gymnastics station would be like personal growth. Hey, I really tried hard to do this today. And whether I got it or not, I tried it, whether it's scary or it's a hard skill. And, this is something that I may have never done before, but it's something that I tried. So I think that, for a lesson like that, what I'm looking for is I want to see the student that said, wow, I've never done that role before. I've never tried this before. And whether they got it, I think their ability to self reflect and say, I can do hard things. I don't know what the exact vocabulary word that I'm looking for is, but reflecting on their own personal growth is something that I think gymnastics and other individualized skills really do a good job of building.
So it's almost like perseverance might be
Yes,
one of the main themes that you're teaching students in a lesson like that.
absolutely. That's kind of the word I was looking for with all the jumble that I said.
That was great. I mean, that's what you made me think of, either perseverance or I think that there's a grade level outcome about being open to trying new activities. That could be another standards-based theme that you would want to teach in that lesson. So, in order to get students to think about perseverance in every station that they go to, what's a question that you might ask them? Sometimes teachers will ask students while they're participating in the station. You might pull a student aside for like 15 seconds and ask them a question, or you might do a turn and talk at the end of each station and give students 30 seconds to talk to a partner. Can you think of a question that you might ask students to get them to reflect on perseverance after they just completed a station on whatever,
Yeah.
egg roll,
So
log roll, something like that?
I think that a question that you can be really direct about is just saying, like, can someone raise their hand and tell me a skill that they practice today that you were scared to try at another time or that you were nervous about? Because I don't think we talk about those things enough in PE. I was an athlete my whole life. I was nervous every single time that I took a field. Like, we don't think that these kids at 6, 7, 8 years old are nervous trying new things. Of course they are. And just getting them to open that shell of it's okay to be nervous. Like, I had a girl this year in gymnastics, all joking aside, said to me, she goes, I will give you an entire box of Oreos if you don't make me do cartwheels again. And I was like, at first I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. And then literally the next day, she tried a cartwheel. And I was like, was that so bad? And she's like, no. So these kids are going through these things that we don't sometimes check in with them, and just to remind them, it's okay to try hard things. It's okay to try things that make you nervous. Now, it's not okay to try a hard thing and flip your body over and be out of control, but it's okay to try a new skill and fail at that skill. But as a profession, we talk so much about the successes that we forget to talk about the failures sometimes of, like, for every kid that you have do great, there's going to be a kid that doesn't get it. And making sure that that kid understands that that's okay, but stopping trying isn't going to make them get that skill in the future.
I could be convinced to do a lot of things for a bag of free Oreos, Patty,
Uh,
let me tell you.
Me too.
What you made me think of is a connection to something that you talked about earlier, which is real world application of the skills that you're teaching in PE. You just very articulately described what a student experience might be in physical education. They might feel nervous, they might feel reluctant to try new things. Not only are you allowing them the opportunity to break through that shell, like you said, you're also giving them strategies to overcome those things. They're going to learn those strategies in your class, and they're also skills that are applicable elsewhere. So they might be nervous to take a math test, or they might be nervous to read a book that's above their grade level. They can then rely on the skills that were taught in PE in order to persevere and overcome and meet some of those other challenges. To me, that's where I feel like the real worth of a physical education program comes from. And that's also how the reputation of a program gets bolstered. Because can you imagine what it's like for a classroom teacher or a building leader to hear a student say, I'm going to try to read a book that's a fourth grade book, even though I'm in third grade. And I learned in PE that when we want to do something that's difficult, here are some strategies that I can use, or something to that effect. I mean, to me, there is no better advertisement for a high quality PE program than a student using a skill that they learned in PE somewhere else in the school.
Yeah, and the phrase that made me think of is Foursquare is a unit that I teach with third through fifth. And I always say at the end of each lesson, be the kid you want to play with on the playground. Has nothing to do with your skill. Would I walk up to you and play with you because of how you act or how you follow the rules or how you communicate your frustrations? Am I going to play with you? And you need to reflect on those things. And then I think kids can really use that. And hey, would I want to work with me during math time if I'm acting up, if I'm doing this or doing that? So I totally, totally understand where you're coming from.
It sounds like a great way to teach students integrity and how to carry that out in various places. One of the ways that I usually end these conversations is by asking, what is some advice that you would give to someone who wants to begin to incorporate some of the things that you've been talking about today?
So I think for me, what it comes down to is we kind of already talked about, every unit isn't going to be your favorite, but it might be somebody's. I think that you can teach kids that they should try new things and that they can be nervous and that's okay. But if you don't do those things as well, it doesn't matter. So to me, where it starts is don't be afraid to have egg on your face. When I first started at this school, this will be my third year at the school. I was worried about what I was going to do or what students were going to like. And some failures happened. As someone that's pretty active on social media and, sees all these people on social media and tries to be one of those people on social media, the thing that I try to reciprocate when I do social media things and I post games is that it's okay if the way that I do things doesn't work for you. I'm sure when I do dance for the first time, I'm going to call Victor that night and say, dude, what do you do that I don't do that makes this so successful? And I think that that's the big thing. If you're listening to this podcast, don't be afraid to fail and don't be afraid to reach out to people. I think that's social media's biggest strength is not the games. I think the biggest strength is I can go on social media and building a network of people in your own school or around you that you feel comfortable enough to say, hey, I'm going to try these things. What do you think about it? They might bounce an idea. My co-teacher is like 3 years away from retiring, and she's literally my best resource because I say, hey, I'm going to try this. And she's like, well, did you think about this? And did you think about that? You need to surround yourself with people that aren't afraid to say, hey, that's a great idea, but have you thought about doing this as well? So if you're listening, surround yourself with people who aren't afraid to critique you because being critiqued isn't something that's wrong. It's something that builds you up to where you need to be. And don't be afraid to fail because if you're going to teach your students that it's okay to fail, you need to be okay with failing too.
I was just going to say, these are all things that you want to convey to your students as well and teach them throughout the year. The ability to both give and receive meaningful feedback is such an important skill. It's important for students. It's important for teachers as well. Paddy, thank you so much for taking the time to share your ideas and for everything that you do for the PE community. It's always powerful for listeners to hear how other teachers are thinking through their practice in real time. So I really appreciate all of the very specific and concrete examples that you gave. I know that the teachers who listen are going to walk away with some great takeaways. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Gary. This was a blast, man. Anytime.